Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's coverage of the general election 2024. My name is Yamuna Turko, and this program is a part of a series of candidate forums hosted by Town Meeting TV in advance of the general election on Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriting partners. You can find all of our forums at cctv.org/general or on our Town Meeting TV YouTube channel, where auto-generated captions are available. If you're tuning in on YouTube, click the subscribe button to stay tuned into local democracy this election season. On tonight's program, we will hear from two candidates running for the uncontested state representative of Chittenden County District 15 seats. There are two candidates running uncontested, Troy Headrick and Brian Cina. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
And we have prepared a list of questions for each of you, and you will have 90 seconds to answer each question. Rebuttals will be allowed if a candidate's name is said directly, and in which case the candidate will then have 30 seconds to respond. If you're tuning in live, we also welcome your questions at 802-862-3966. If you call in, we will do our best to prioritize your question, though we will be screening calls to ensure questions are not repeated. We ask that you share your name, the town you live in, and that your question be directed at all candidates and not just one specifically. You can also submit questions for future forums online at cctv.org/general. We are going to begin with 1-minute opening statements, and we will begin with Brian.
Thank you. So this will be my 5th time running for election as a state representative for Chittenden 15, formerly known as Chittenden 6-4. And going into this session, I believe that the number one priority has to be the housing crisis, that the lack of affordable and accessible housing is at the root of a lot of our problems. And it's affecting public health and community safety. For many years, I have been fighting for us to rapidly build a broad continuum of public and private options of housing. And we have failed to deliver. And it looks like we need up to 24,000 new units by 2030 to meet the need in Vermont. And we have fallen behind, and we can't wait any longer. We need a mass public works effort where we train community members to come out and volunteer. We create new jobs for people. We help the people who are unhoused build the housing for themselves and others. We need to do something on the scale of the New Deal in Vermont to address the housing crisis. And so going back, I'm hoping that we can work together on this and finally guarantee housing for all as a human right.
Thank you very much. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Troy Headrick. I am finishing my first term as a representative from the Chittenden 15 district and have been absolutely pleased and honored to serve alongside Brian for this district. In my time, I was on the Corrections and Institutions Committee. That's where I got assigned. I do believe I'll probably go back. I can't imagine why they would put me anywhere else. When I'm not serving in the legislature, I am a longtime staff member at the University of Vermont. I began work there in 1996, and I worked with the Center for Student Conduct out of the Dean of Students office. I agree with Brian that housing is absolutely our first priority and absolutely sources so many of the issues that so many people are talking to us about that needs our attention. And in addition to that, I know we have to figure out how we can create a robust public education system, pay for that public education system by not burdening the middle class and folks who want to age in place in their homes. That being said, I will have a huge focus on labor issues coming into this biennium. We'll be introducing some bills very specific to the impact on higher education labor.
Thank you very much. Okay, so our first...
Point of order, he said my name, do I get to... I'm just kidding, just kidding.
Unfortunately, no, it wasn't a directed comment. Every single time, we can go back and forth the whole time.
No, I'm just kidding.
So you both brought up housing, so our first question is going to be about housing. So this past session, Democrats in the House proposed sending an additional $100 million per year for 10 years on publicly subsidized affordable housing. This level of investment was not passed in the Senate. Would you support this level of public investment in housing? And we will begin with Troy.
I'm going to support any investment in housing, and we need to pay far more attention and create far more opportunities for increasing affordable housing in this state. I mean, my simple answer is absolutely yes. We're going to talk more about the immediate housing crisis, I hope, of the number of unhoused folks that were just released from the General Assistance Housing Program. So I hope to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, my answer to your question is absolutely.
Thank you very much. And may I begin?
I do support that level of investment in housing, and I hope that's enough. That might not be enough. The reality is that we have treated housing as a commodity rather than as a basic need and a right, and we have allowed the few to extract wealth from the many through housing, and they've accumulated a vast amount of wealth. They're sweeping up properties all across Vermont and the United States, the planet, and I think it's time that we take a stand and we say that we're not going to allow housing to be treated this way, and that we ask those who've profited off of extracting wealth from overpriced housing to pay back, that we tax them and that we reinvest that money to fund these investments in housing. And furthermore, I think we can use the taxation system to create incentives for landlords to keep rent within a certain band of affordability, and we can, or below, I would say, a certain band of affordability, and penalties for going above that band, so that if a landlord wants to hike their rent up hundreds of dollars every few months, like what we're hearing, people's rent going from $2,000 to $2,400, like that, if they're going to do that, that the profit they make is going to be taken back by the state and invested into public affordable housing. So I could go on about this, but I think my time's up.
It is.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. You're actually perfectly on it. Our next question is pertaining to emergency shelter, to kind of extend the housing and houselessness issue being faced in Vermont. So Vermont reported 3,295 people experiencing homelessness in 2023, up from 1,100 in 2020. This year, the state is rolling back its pandemic-era emergency shelter capacity across the state, pushing hundreds more Vermonters onto the streets. How will you approach the need for emergency shelter in the coming session, and how should the state pay for it? We'll begin with you.
So I'm not going to wait for the session to start. I'm a volunteer with the People's Kitchen. We've been going out and feeding people at night in the streets and hearing what's going on. It's disastrous. The violence that people are facing who are being kicked out of the motels right now is ridiculous. It's unacceptable. It's a human rights violation what the state is doing to not only the people being evicted from the motels, but to the communities where there's nowhere for the people to go. And so I'm on the Land Access and Opportunity Board, and we've been talking about taking action immediately to see what we can do on this issue, and I could say more about that another time in detail, but we're still trying to figure it out. Those are public meetings, though, so if people are interested, they can check out our meetings. But I'm hoping that we will go back into an emergency session of the legislature if we can't fix this through executive action, which I think it's unlikely we can do enough. I think we're going to need to have an emergency session and make some decisions about how to reallocate funds, reinvest funds to stabilize the situation, and then we need to take rapid action in the next session toward guaranteeing housing for all. It's great to have a shelter network, and we need that right now, but we need to establish that and then immediately focus on the permanent options, because we've been, as they say in the legislature, kicking the can down the road for far too long, and now we're really paying the consequences. And I think I said earlier a bit about how we can fund these things, that we should tax those who've accumulated wealth off of housing and off of land and reinvest that into the commons, into providing housing is a human right for everyone. And people can contribute to their ability towards that housing, but that it be an affordable basic need that we can all meet.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to start. There is actually right now, there's a pretty significant flurry of activity of legislators exploring the options that we might have as paths forward through the immediate crisis, the crisis that is created by unhousing, In Chittenden County alone, there are 27 families with children who were recently kicked out of the hotels. And I want to name, and Representative Cina is on my list of people to name, so I'm not sucking up to you. But our colleague Kate Logan, Representative Logan, has been working tirelessly on this and exploring what those avenues are. And she has recently put out an email to our legislators, and we'll have more information, more details about that as well. Rep. Jubilee McGill, also in the field right now, providing testimony on the very immediate impact of unhousing so many people from that program. And Representative Cina did talk about all the work that he does, probably on a nightly basis, of getting food to our unhoused neighbors. There is work happening, and there are paths forward that the governor can take. We are in the process of making sure that everybody is kind of informed about what those are so that we can decide what our next steps are, whether that's executive action or bringing us back to the session to create new legislation.
Thank you very much. Our next question is about property taxes and education, something you've both brought up. This year, many Vermonters will see double-digit increases in their property taxes, and nearly a third of school budgets failed on town meeting day. How will you approach education funding reform and property taxes for the coming fiscal year? And we'll begin with you.
I'm going to start by just stating that this is complicated to me, and I have pretty almost immediate access to the questions I have as this creates. But the way that Vermont has chosen to fund public education is complicated, and that's not me trying to ditch the question. That is me saying, if it's complicated to me as somebody who can probably make the phone call I need to make to answer my questions within probably 10, 15 minutes, I can't imagine that it's not complicated for most of the people who are just seeing their property taxes increase, predictably and exponentially, time and time again. We absolutely do need better solutions. I want to state that I do have trust in the people in the room. We have some great minds thinking about this. I am not on the committees of jurisdiction that will impact this. I do trust folks in our education committee, folks on Ways and Means for trying to find new avenues. Vermont has a long history of making public education work in a fairly spread out state through the use of academies that have served us well, and through the use of our public education system, and I'm certain we can fall back into a system that works. It's going to take taxation. If we substitute property taxes, we got to find that somewhere else. I am not at all opposed to taxing owners of second homes. Looking at a wealth tax, we have the wealthiest Vermonters have already indicated their willingness to fund a robust public education system, and we got to look at ways that we can contain the costs that are impacting our school budgets, especially around healthcare, and I'm sure Representative Cina has some ideas on that.
Thank you very much.
That's a great handoff there, because I was going to say that I was on the Burlington School Board for 2 terms, and education finance was complicated. It got more complicated. We have this commission looking into it now, and I'm trusting they'll come back with some recommendations, and it might be best if I focused on one piece, which is in my area of expertise. I'm on the healthcare committee, and so I'll speak a little about the impact of healthcare cost on the property taxes. There's been, when Vermont passed Act 48, which was the universal health care law, we promised the people we were going to deliver health care as a human right, and the governor at the time and leadership of the legislature tanked the idea because when you looked at the projections, they said that the cost was going to be too high. Well, the amount we're paying now is more than it would have been if we had universal health care. And there's many factors about why that we could get into in another question. But how this is impacting your property taxes is that when we fund our education system, we take care of our workers, we provide them with health care, and we provide it to them even when they retire. So we have thousands and thousands of workers to whom we've made a promise, who we have to provide health care to, as insurance companies are hiking the rates up double digits every year. We're looking at, for some people, 12 to 20-something% in 1 year of an increase in their insurance. I'm probably going to drop my health insurance at this point because I can't afford that. But we can't drop the health insurance for our teachers and for our state workers and for the school workers. So until we get the cost of healthcare under control, it's going to keep impacting that expense on the education system, and that's going to keep driving up our property tax rates. So we need to focus on the cost of healthcare is part of the equation of getting a better sustainable system for financing education.
Okay. Our next question moves actually into healthcare. Something you've both talked about. I know you'd mentioned you're not on the committee, but you are, but I want you to both be able to speak on it, even if it's an area that you'd like to look more into, just a general understanding. It's a huge concern of a lot of Vermonters,
I'm glad Brian's starting on this one.
So we are going to begin with healthcare. One of the primary drivers in rising school budgets and affordability issues in Vermont is the increasing cost of health insurance. What can the state do to reduce the cost of healthcare and meet the healthcare needs of every Vermonter?
Well, we could actually follow the law and fulfill the promise of Act 48 and keep working towards a universal healthcare system. And more specifically, let's talk about recent years with the Biden-Harris administration. A lot of people don't know this, but Kamala Harris has been working on Medicaid expansion behind the scenes and ending medical debt for Americans. That President Biden, this is something that he delegated to her. And the Biden-Waltz administration, the Harris-Waltz, it's confusing with all this like musical chairs and politics, but the Harris-Waltz, a Democratic administration versus the other administration that might be possible, would follow through on that and would be looking at how to use executive power to expand Medicaid, to eliminate medical debt. And so in Vermont, we expanded access to Medicaid. In our last session, we were poised to expand it to, the number is going to elude me now that I'm sitting here, but it's like, was it 40 to 60,000 people? And then the Senate, yes, I'm pointing fingers at the Senate, cut it back dramatically because they didn't want to tax corporations. And because that's how we were going to come up with our money to match the federal money to provide that benefit. But what we did do is pass a technical analysis that the state is doing right now, looking at how can we expand access to Medicaid to various populations, including putting it on the exchange as a public option. And so I'm hoping that technical analysis shows us that it's viable, and then with the right administration in Washington, we can get the waivers needed and expand Medicaid. And so by expanding access to Medicaid, we could reduce those costs because perhaps state workers, teachers, others could get Medicaid. And the more people you put into a risk pool, the more you spread out the risk. So the more healthier people you put in, the lower the costs will be for everyone. And right now, the Medicaid risk pool is a high-use risk pool. So by combining everyone together, it's possible over time we should be able to reduce the premiums. There's also other ways, but I think I said enough about that one that I should hand it over to my district mate.
Thank you very much.
I don't have a lot to add, and I'm so thankful that Representative Cina is in the room as those conversations are happening. Again, I have a lot of faith in the committee process in the House, and I'm certain that those conversations are going to continue with priority. In addition to creating a universal health care system here in Vermont, I think this is a federal question. You don't have to look too far before realizing what our Senator Sanders is doing, especially as he holds Big Pharma to their feet to the coals. So again, I think there's reasons for optimism. I think we have to keep our foot on the gas pedal, and I think we have to keep these conversations active. And again, I'm glad that Brian is in the room as that happens.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next question does move quite a bit away, but it could be, at least I think, they're all related circularly, but this specific question is about public safety and criminal justice. Public safety is a top priority for many voters in this election. This past session, lawmakers increased judicial staff, increased retail theft penalties, and expanded restorative justice practices in Vermont. What more needs to be done by the legislature to advance public safety and repair Vermont's criminal justice system? We will begin with Troy.
Yeah, so I've been watching these forums to the degree that I'm able to. I just watched your South Burlington forum, and I think I heard Rep. Lalonde, Chair of Judiciary, talk about how his committee is actually at the end of the process by which we address public safety. I will insert that I think Department of Corrections is at the far end of that spectrum, and that's my committee. So these are the barometers I'm seeing in Vermont and in the State House in particular about kind of the current political appetite for how we're going to respond to public safety. And the barometers are not good. I was only able to convince, so Representative Rachelson, also from Burlington, introduced legislation that would divest Vermont from using for-profit, out-of-state private prisons. I was able to convince 2 people on my committee that we should divest from private for-profit prisons. 2 people out of a committee of 11, meaning it never hit the floor of 150 in the House. If our collective group of legislatures is unwilling to even discuss our use of private prisons, right now there are 114, as of this morning, Vermonters in Mississippi in a for-profit prison. Getting them to listen to alternative ways of resolving impact on the community is going to be a really strong uphill battle. Despite the pushback, we are doing more to guarantee that we're going to continue to incarcerate more and more Vermonters. We did create more felonies that will make it easier to incarcerate people. We did create legislation that makes it easier, actually the default, to charge children as adults in now 14 crimes instead of 12. Again, these are the pragmatic truths of how the legislation is currently looking at the public's response or requests to respond to public safety. And I know this has been talked about too, our courts are significantly backlogged, and that is having an impact on the speed by which we respond to criminal behavior, and that has an impact. Right now, of the 114, again, as of this morning, women who are incarcerated in Vermont, 40 of them are being detained prior to their trial. Of the 1,438 men who are incarcerated in Vermont, 415 are currently being detained before their trial. Those numbers aren't acceptable to me. It has a huge impact on why we're using out-of-state prisons, private prisons. Again, I see a lot of hurdles in how we're going to respond to public safety in a timely fashion.
Thank you very much.
Sorry I went late. I know I did.
It's okay. Go ahead.
So I would say that we need to shift from this idea that we're going to punish people and use state-sanctioned violence to get them to comply with certain behaviors to a model that balances accountability with care. That when someone causes harm to someone else, that we don't let them get away with it in some situations and not in others, or that we sort of give out justice unequally, but that we hold everybody accountable, landlords and tenants, unhoused people and housed people, people of color and white people, rich people and poor people, because that's not how the system has worked. And so we need to make sure everyone is held accountable and everyone is wrapped in care. That in that process, the victim is wrapped in care, and that their needs are centered, and then the offender is provided with the resources needed so that they can improve their situation and not reoffend. And in the last session, the governor had this sort of law and order kind of crime and punishment narrative that our colleagues unfortunately bought into, where we decriminalize certain things, like we're creating safe injection sites, but you can't steal tampons again or you're going to end up in jail. Like, it's like this strange, confusing world we've created where when people are stealing to survive, we're going to put them in jail, yet incarceration is the least effective, most costly practice of government. And I have plenty of research that I can share with anyone who wants to see it, or you can look on the legislative record. I've given many presentations that we need to reinvest from incarceration into community care. We need to look at what's driving criminal behavior and harmful behavior and address the drivers. And if you look at what those are, it's access to housing, it's a primary one right now, access to health care, access to nutrition, access to economic and social opportunity, and access to education. And so by strategically investing in the community-based services and housing that people need, we can hold them accountable and then have them be in the least restrictive setting that makes sense for the harm they've caused. So we should only be restricting someone's freedom when we have to. And otherwise, we're not taking away freedom. We're asking people to take action to make up for the harm that they caused. And that can be reparations to the victim. It should be. To the community, but also a chance to improve their situation so that they feel like they belong in society and that they have something to contribute and that they're important, that they're still valuable even though they made a mistake. And so I think the answer is to shift our thinking to accountability and care and to reinvest from crime and punishment strategies and incarceration into our communities.
Thank you very much. Okay. And we have another question. It is about the overdose crisis currently. So 231 people died from an overdose in Vermont in 2023, with 95% of overdoses involving fentanyl. What must be done to prevent overdoses, promote addiction recovery, and deter the illegal sale of opioids in Vermont? And we'll begin with you, Brian.
With me?
Yes.
So, I have 4 jobs. Many people know this, not everyone knows this. I'm a social worker for 2 of those jobs. So I work providing outpatient therapy and emergency mental health services. And so I've worked with people struggling with substance use disorder. I also have my own history of addiction and mental health issues that you're constantly in recovery from. And what we really need to do is have low barrier access to care. We don't have enough rehabs. We're underpaying people in the healthcare system. So we've overburdened the healthcare system for years. And so we have a lot of burnout and compassion fatigue. However, we have an opportunity at this moment in history to invest more in peer support services as they roll out in Vermont. And so we have an opportunity to as in the process of someone recovering, to empower them to work and help others recover. And in order to do this, we really need to think holistically that we need, like I was saying about incarceration earlier, a continuum of residential options from inpatient residential to transitional and supportive housing to community-based housing with people wrapped in services at every step of the way that follows them, that we need that level of care available to people struggling with addiction. And there are some promising new treatments coming out. Vermont did pass a clinical psychedelics working group that's going to be looking at rapid rollout of the use of psychedelics in treatment, which is a new option that is very promising for addiction. And contingency management is another thing we need to look at. That research is showing that there's only 2 things that really, I could be wrong, so someone can correct me, 2 evidence-based practices for dealing with psychostimulant addiction, like cocaine, meth, etc. Clinical psychedelics through ibogaine or iboga, it's an African plant, and contingency management. And what is contingency management? Every week a person tests clean, you give them a reward, and the rewards increase. And research shows that once a person's getting paid to stay clean, that they actually stay clean and they want to work and they want to make more money. And you don't have to do that forever. But we need to be thinking creatively, because when we punish people, it costs way more than rewarding them for taking care of themselves. So I think we need to be thinking about offering more kinds of treatment and it's ultimately about specialized, unique treatment to each individual, because not the same thing works on everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can just punctuate a few of those. Again, I know Rep. Cina has kind of mentioned everything that needs to be mentioned. I will state that incarceration is not going to be a solution as we look at getting people the recovery support that they need. I will go as far as to say that the medically assisted treatment program that is currently utilized by our incarcerated facilities is a Band-Aid, a temporary hold. And long-term recovery is not happening because we incarcerate people. It's just not. So I would be up for discussing anything that moves us away towards decriminalization and away from punishment forms and all in for anything that increases the easy, free access to low-barrier recovery centers.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to do a lightning round now. So how this works is they're either yes or no questions, or you can answer in less than 10 seconds. So, I know. So we're going to go like this. So we're going to start Troy, Brian, Troy, Brian, Troy, Brian. Okay. So should private schools be funded by public dollars?
No, I will put a caveat in there that we can return to a system that has long served Vermont and keep the academies in place. I would also state that schools that are serving students with an IEP, I think, belong in the mix as well.
I would say yes, simply because I work with youth who school districts pay private schools to help them, so I wouldn't want them to lose access to that.
Makes sense. Should biomass, burning wood, play a role in emissions reduction strategies?
Who are you starting with?
You. I'm just going to go back and forth.
Okay.
Sorry.
Play a role, yes, with an eventual weaning off of biomass.
Okay.
Yes, we need to make a gradual transition.
Thank you. Where do you get your news from? We'll start with you because you drink water.
The streets.
Where do you get your news from?
Gosh, VPR, Digger, 7 Days. I watch the MSNBC from 4 to 6 p.m. And I frequent Reddit. I think it's a wonderful finger on the pulse of the Burlington and Vermont communities.
Okay. And finally, what is your favorite ice cream in Vermont? Brian?
I don't really have favorites.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not a big ice cream guy. There's a peanut butter wizard at Little Gordo that is amazing.
Yeah,
what's it
that
called?
is good.
I can't remember what it's called.
But it is good.
It's their
Gordo
version
has
of a
good ice
blizzard,
cream.
and it's a peanut butter based, and yeah, any day.
Sounds
I have to say that I'm learning how to make granita, like Sicilian ice, and what I'm making is better than anything else.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but I'm not.
It's a bold statement.
I'm just saying it's like I'm making it myself has become the new thing.
Oh, it's become a new.
Yeah,
that makes
yeah,
sense. It's a
making
new
my-
process.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 30 seconds for closing statements, and we'll begin with Troy.
Looking forward to going back. It's looking like I will. I feel like I have a better handle on how this all works. I'm by no means going to be perfect, but I'm already getting things rolling with some of the conversations that need to happen, especially around changes to our labor force.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Those who know me would say I have a penchant for the dramatic, but I feel like I'm actually toning it down, saying that at this moment in history, we are at the convergence of some serious crises, that we are facing the collapse of our ecosystems, and people are living in denial of that alone. But then we're looking at like an economic system that has been built unsustainably, that has failed to take care of the people, and we're seeing a polysubstance pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. We're seeing, so when you see the convergence of all these crises, it's amplifying their impact. It's like a superstorm, like Sandy, years ago, and so it's really it's increasing inequity, it's increasing disparities, and it's really forcing us to acknowledge that we are on a path that is unsustainable and that we can't continue down. So I am hopeful in this next session that the housing crisis is a wake-up call for us to take a long, hard look at that. And I am hopeful that if we solve the housing crisis in the right way, if we find ways to integrate waste management, energy production, food production, inclusion and inclusive practices into the solutions to the housing crisis, we can address many of these crises at once. Just like they're affecting us once, we can take action to create intersectional solutions, and hopefully someday people will look back at this moment in history and see it as a turning point for humanity.
Thank you very much. So thank you for tuning into Town Meeting TV's ongoing coverage of local candidates, local budgets, and ballot items. You can find this and many more forums at cctv.org/general or on our Town Meeting TV YouTube channel. Don't forget to cast your ballot in the general election on or before November 5th. Then tune into Town Meeting TV's result recap show that evening at 7:30 p.m. Contact your local clerk to find out how to obtain a ballot and to register to vote. In Vermont, you can register on Election Day. Thank you so much for watching and sharing Town Meeting TV.